Since independence, the guiding principle of Nigeria's foreign policy and the pursuit of its national interest in both its bilateral and its multilateral relations have remained a reflection of its perception of the international environment. In 1988, Nigeria officially announced its commitment to economic diplomacy, a result of the lingering economic crisis and structural adjustment program at the time. This essentially led to not only certain shifts in the analysis of Nigeria's foreign policy after 1988, but also a recap that also triggered a review of current policies in the Fourth Republic, which raised the following questions. Can Nigerian foreign policy be said to be consistent with economic development, or does it more or less remain altruistic in character and essence? Now, these questions, among others, will be our focus on the program today. And we have joining us in the studio the Nigerian ambassador to Burundi, His Excellency Dr. Elijah Onyeagba. Good morning and thank you for joining us.
Good morning and thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for joining us this morning,
Thank you very
Your
much.
Excellency.
Yeah.
Now, let's begin from the basics. Some people say that in recent years, there is really no clarity about Nigerian foreign policy. Is it really clear?
Thank you very much for bringing me to your program this morning. The issue with foreign policy is that it varies from one administration to another. And being an ambassador under President Muhammadu Buhari, I can discuss, in clear details what the essence of Mr. President's foreign policy is about. I can tell you foreign policy is about the procedures and what you do to be able to defend or protect or encourage or promote your domestic policies in the international arena. It has a lot to do with protecting the territorial integrity of the country. It has a lot to do with ensuring that there are no forms of external aggression. It has a lot to do with engaging other international communities and to ensure a very good outcome for your country. It has a lot to do with ensuring that Nigeria's, maintains its dignity in the Committee of Nations. So for President Muhammadu Buhari, he's been very clear from day one what his foreign policy is like. And I can tell you, number one is that Africa is the centerpiece of President Muhammadu Buhari's foreign policy. And what does that really mean? It means that Nigeria sees itself as a leader in the continent. It means that Nigeria does everything possible to assist other African countries because it sees itself as the big brother within the continent. And for example, even for our neighbors, the policy is that we have to assist our neighbors without any condition attached to them. So that's why you see us trying to ensure that we have a good relationship with Niger, with Cameroon, and some of these countries that are actually neighbors to us, because maintaining that close relationship with those countries ensures that you are also protected as well. Because you can. That's obviously the easiest route to infiltrate your security. So clearly for the president, he's been very clear. When he came on in 2015, he's been very clear about fighting corruption, for example. That's why the African Union made him the anti-corruption champion. And in addition to that, in most of the outings at the African Union, meetings with the European Union, at the United Nations General Assembly, he kept talking about recovery of looted funds. And he's done a lot of work in that regard. So I hear the issue about the conflict, about the non-clarity of a foreign policy, but that's not to be said with this government. You've seen the way he's engaged with the international community. Nigeria, under President Muhammadu Buhari, has had that, that respect, if you like, within both the continent and outside the continent.
Well, you talked about Nigeria, playing a leading role, and that's playing big brother to other African, countries. But do you think we're really living up to, that reputation, or are there challenges that we're being faced with?
The truth about diplomacy is that there will always be challenge. And at every particular point in time, every government is challenged with either the internal issues, because really foreign policy is engagement and ensuring that you get the best outcome for your country. I mean, it was very clear when President Trump of the United States came on, his policy was very simple: America first. for Nigeria and for quite a lot of countries, they engage trying to see how they can get the best outcome in every form of engagement. And these engagements sometimes come in the form of bilaterals. It can also come in the form of multilaterals. Multilateral in the sense that you now have, more than two countries coming together to negotiate. So in this, you become everyone is basically trying to see how their country is protected in that. And that's what you find in the African Union, that's what you find in the European Union, that's what you find in the United Nations. So yes, I hear you loud and clear, but if you ask me to assess what this present administration have done, I'll tell you clearly that some of the things it's set out to achieve, which is to become a leader in the continent, the president is doing that very well, which is also to ensure that some of the things we wanted to drive locally, I'm sure at every United Nations General Assembly that the president speaks, he speaks on recovering the looted funds that we have stashed all over the world. And obviously you can, your guess is as good as mine, whether that has been successful or not. He's also done very well in economic diplomacy, because if you look at the travels, if you look at the engagement, if you look at, how we have succeeded, or he has succeeded in getting some Nigerians into very good positions at that multilateral level and at the international stage. Talk about the appointment of Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala as the head of Director General of the World Trade Organization. Talk about what Nigeria is doing as a commissioner in African Union in charge of peace, security, and political affairs, Ambassador Bankole Adeoye. Talk about the fact that Nigeria is also the head of the African Development Bank. Talk about the fact that Nigeria is also the head of the African Export-Import Afrexim Bank in Cairo. So this has actually gone to throw Nigeria in the, show Nigeria in a good light. And usually what we do and why we think it's important to maintain a very close working relationship with African countries is that no matter how big or how small a country is, it is one vote at the United Nations. So if you're very close to them, so what we basically do is to send out envoys to those countries to say, hey, Nigeria is interested in this kind of position, please support. Nigeria is interested in this kind of position, please support. And that's why you find out that any position that any Nigeria indicates interest at, at that level, you find out that we get a lot of support from the African, from African colleagues. So I think we've been largely successful. Yes, there are other things that needs to be done. Even the economic diplomacy I'm talking about, there's a lot more that needs to be done. Lately, there was this committee that was set up to look at the size of the Nigerian mission to see how they can be adequately funded. Yes, that's obviously a big issue, because while we think that closing down some missions might make some sense, other countries like Egypt also doesn't think that's the way to go, because Egypt have more missions within the African continent and the world than Nigeria. They also fund their missions much better than they do for Nigeria. I understand the funding constraints, but that is not to say, because what happens is that you go ahead and shut them down. After some time, you begin to also see the need to reopen them. So you go back again and you reopen them again, because you can't be a leader without having a lot of platforms or presence, how to negotiate with the rest of the countries. So that's what Nigeria claims to be the leader in Africa, and to that extent, we've done fairly well so far, because we've been engaging very well. But I also think that even shutting down missions is not the way to go. At some point, we will express interest at having a seat at the United Nations Security Council. At some point, we'll express one or two, and you find out that if you are not there negotiating with the country and talking to them, how do you seek for their support? So that's basically why my own personal assessment of our foreign policy. Yes, there are challenges, but I think so far so good in my opinion.
Talking about leadership, and of course, as you said, there are challenges. There are supposed to be benefits that come with that leading role, that come with that positioning as a giant of Africa. And let's talk specifically around the area you are currently serving. Southern Africa, for example, Nigeria,
Eastern Africa.
You are in Eastern Africa, but also your neighbors in the Southern Africa, even parts of even parts of Eastern Africa. Nigeria played a key role in some of their struggles for independence and other stability issues. But then recently, we've been having challenges of Nigerians facing dehumanizing treatment in some of these African countries, even closer home in Ghana and all that. What is happening, really?
Well, thank you very much for that very important question. There has always been, the struggle between Nigeria and South Africa, for example. Let me isolate the countries and deal with them one after the other. There's always this economic struggle, power struggle, which economy is bigger, which market is bigger. So we've always had that subtle, issue with South Africa. But be that as it may, I think the challenge Nigeria have had with South Africa is not just even about Nigerians, that there's this xenophobic attacks that they've constantly had over the years. And it's not peculiar to Nigeria, even though we know that, whenever we get into a country, we have a lot of presence. There are lots of Nigerians in South Africa. But clearly, they also seem to have forgotten the level of sacrifice Nigeria has made, or Nigeria made in the course of their struggle during the apartheid season. So we continue to engage and we continue to remind the government of South Africa. Don't forget where we are coming from. It's always not a very good thing in the international scene to have governments that have short memory. So we will continue to we've continued to remind them, and we've achieved some successes here and there, but it can never be Uhuru in the international arena. If you come to East Africa, for example, Nigeria is fairly doing well in East Africa. Around the East African corridor, Nigeria has a very good relationship with Kenya, with Uganda, with Burundi, for example, even Rwanda. If you come to Burundi, Nigeria's embassy is one of the most respected embassies in the Republic of Burundi. Why? Nigeria has been standing for Burundi. There are times when we have had to send people through the United Nations to help them, within the period of their crisis. We've made several donations to assist the country. And clearly for Nigeria, it's important that we have a good presence, within the East African corridor. Tanzania, you also know, Nigeria have also got a very good relationship with Tanzania, and even the likes of Congo DRC that recently joined the East African community, bringing it closer home within the, the West African coast. Yes, we've had this issue with Ghana. Ghana is not as big as Nigeria. The economy of Lagos is larger than that of the economy of Ghana. But you also know that there are legacy issues. Cast your mind back when we had Ghana Must Go in Nigeria. So clearly, maybe that's once in a while you begin to also have that kind of treatment. What we have seen from Ghana, it's not very good, because time and time again they've had cause to go to shops, close down Nigerian shops, try to get them or frustrate them in one way or the other. But clearly both countries are signatories to the ECOWAS protocol that allows for a movement of people, goods and services across the continent. So they can't deny the fact that both of us are signatory to that protocol. Clearly, what they've done in those instances are not the best outcome for the country. But again, in the international arena, diplomacy basically means that you continue to engage. You continue to engage with the right spirit and try to find a way to get the best outcome for your country. And usually when you have a spike in any of those issues, what you find is that the government of Nigeria sends special envoy to go and sit down with the government of the country to begin to look at areas of addressing those issues. In the case of South Africa, I know that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs sent some people to South Africa, some ambassadors and very senior officials of the ministry, to sit down with them and begin to look at the agreements again. What can be done, or how do we make it better? I understand at some point they were asking for Nigerian business people to insure their goods in the event of those outcomes. But we were also negotiating to say, listen, if this happens to our people, what we're going to do is to have the government responsible, take responsibility for those kind of losses that come as a result of those xenophobic attacks. But we are negotiating, and I'm sure at the end of the day, before we append our signatures, be rest assured that Nigeria as a leader in the continent will get the best outcome for its people.
All right, well, some quarters actually seem to believe that Nigeria should review, overhaul its foreign policy, saying old visions are used for new issues in the Nigerian policy. Now, do you think there's a big change, in the recent years compared to how Nigerian government have formulated their foreign policy in the past?
Yes, I totally agree. The reason why I will tell you that I totally agree that there's a need for review is because things are changing in the world. The world is not static. What was an issue yesterday is no longer an issue today. And too many things have come. It's just like when Nigeria say it's fighting security, the insecurity challenge, we've seen it metamorphose from taking over territories in the country to banditry. So things keep changing, not just on the security issue, even in the economy. You've seen a lot of the impact of the digitalism of the economy. A lot of things are going digital from what they used to be, from the manual processes that they have. Even our banking system, for example, at some point we were, as bankers, we part of the marketing strategy, or what you tell your customer is that you're online. At some point is that we are online and we are real time. At some point is open account because we can give you an ATM card. None of those. You can imagine sitting down and someone walks into your office and says, "I'm a banker. Please open account with us because we are online." You take all of these things for granted. That is also the same that happens in the international arena. There are so many interests, and in addition to that, for Nigeria as a country, we must also clearly define what our interest is in every country that we go to. If we're in Russia, we're in Russia, what do we intend to get out of Russia? If we're in the United States, how do we engage with the people of the United States? And so on and so forth. So it's looking like sometimes some of these interests are very blurred and not very clear. So that's why I believe at this point in time, there's also a review of a lot of workshops and seminars have actually been going on in trying to review our policy. But again, the number one minister actually of foreign affairs is the president of the republic. It will vary from one government to another. I've read, for example, the APC standard bearer's, the renewed hope document on foreign policy, and it's clearly made it very clear 3 points objective of what he wants how he wants to drive his foreign policy, and of course, he's also further broken it down into what happens, within the ECOWAS corridor, what happens in the larger African Union, how he engages with Europe and, of course, the rest of the West and all of that. So, yes, just like every other said, it's something that is rolling. The plan has to be rolling at every particular point in time. You want to sit back and look at what your objectives were, how successful have you been with those objectives, and what kind of impact have they also had on your domestic issues, because really foreign policy is about trying to advance some of the objectives you want to achieve locally at the international arena. So yes, I agree that there is a need for constant review of what our foreign policies are. It will always continue to happen, and of course, once every president or every leader comes in, they will also look at it to think about how they want to drive it, and then what kind of adjustments that they need to make to be able to achieve their own objectives.
Okay, when you made mention of the issue of economic interest in terms of foreign relations, and what comes to my mind is, of course, as you also said, that foreign policy is driven by our domestic policies and
Yes.
also an administration's vision. And now, looking at the Buhari government's protectionist strategy in terms of business, trying to protect local industries and all that. Look at, for example, the issue of border closure, ban on some importations and all that. How is that? Do you see that faring well in terms of our foreign policy?
Well, thank you very much. I know what you're talking about, and it's always important to understand the reason why certain actions are taken. At the time, Nigeria was like a dumping ground where, our borders are not very, very well protected. So what you find is that people through our neighbors getting all forms of goods into the country. A country of 200 million people were importing rice, things that we can easily cultivate in Nigeria. A country with over 200 million people are getting, what they call these used materials, what they call okrika or whatever it is. We are getting in even eggs, all kinds of vegetable products into the country. Cabbages and carrots and all of these stuffs are actually imported into the country. And of course, what the borders did is that you can actually they became so open that, through Lome, through any of these Cameroon, things actually are smuggled into the country. And it became a very big issue for the president. And we said, no, that's not the way to go for a nation. I think, you know, that was a very good policy at that time because it was important to also protect the local people because there is even something that Obasanjo's government called the backward integration policy. And what does that really mean? If you, for example, cement, we didn't have cement in enough quantity, even though we're a constructing nation. He allowed the importation of those cements, but also gave all sorts of concession for the plants or for the companies that want to get involved in cement manufacturing in Nigeria, so that at some point when they start producing, then you can shut the border. Today we are actually very good with cement production. So that's also what the president felt it was important to do with sectors like agricultural sector. How can we be importing the food that we eat? It was important because we have the land, we have the manpower, and of course we have the rains that always falls and ensures that whatever we plant grow. And that was the reason why even the central bank had to step in to also assist farmers with all those kind of programs like the Anchor Borers program and a whole lot of other programs so that rice farmers can also begin to produce as much as we can consume in the domestic market. So yes, that was okay. It was also to protect the local industries because if you do not protect them, what you find is that people that bring in rice can actually cut down bring down the price so low that it becomes unprofitable for the local producers to even farm in the first instance. And how bad can it be for an economy when you cannot even produce the food that your people are eating? Is it that you don't have the land? Countries like Netherlands, for example, don't have as much land as one state have in Nigeria, yet they make a very significant percentage of their gross domestic product comes from farming. Do you understand what I mean? So clearly for us, it was something that is very important. You also find out that when you open your borders and you allow all of these things to come in, there is also the impact of that on your foreign demand for foreign exchange. Because what you find is that people will continue to look for foreign exchange to import goods that can actually be produced locally, especially food. It's actually very embarrassing. Any country that can't feed themselves is in a very, very difficult position. So it was a very good policy for government. And you can also see the progress that has been made. Yes, people can argue that the price of rice hasn't come down despite the closure of borders. But again, you see, when even prices go up, it encourages the local farmers in that production. So it also finds a way to reduce capital flight because that money that should have gone out looking for, encouraging the likes of Thailand and other countries that were producing rice and bringing it to the country is retained within the country. And that profit margin is also retained within the country, which is also very good. So it's not really a big issue. Every country must try to find a way to protect its own people. In the international arena, nobody has your interest better than you. You are the person that knows what you want. It's left for you to sit down and figure out how to go about it. And that's why it's always very good that from administration to another, we are very clear as a country what we want to achieve in the international arena. We wanted to protect our businessmen. We wanted to ensure that we are not exposed. Our monies are not moving to go and get the things that we need. If the monies are going out to get machineries to go into refineries, for example, machineries to go into manufacturing, we can understand that. But the situation where we are importing toothpick, importing pencil, importing pen, importing all manner of things, we are obviously exposing ourselves as a country.
Thank you very much. Now,
yes.
Let's go a bit personal.
Yes.
Usually ambassadors are, the idea of an ambassador is somebody maybe a gray-haired person with a walking stick and all that. How is it how is it for you, becoming an ambassador at this age? And also, how does that speak to the issue of youth participation in governance?
Thank you very much. Yes, that's what you find. But I don't think I'm the Nigeria youngest ambassador. At this point in time, yes, but historically, we've had the likes of Matthew Mbu become an ambassador at the age of 20-something. Even Baba Gana Kingibe, His Excellency Baba Gana Kingibe, also was sent to Greece at a very young age. And if you also look at the international arena, you also find younger people that are getting involved.
But lately, that has not been the experience. Maybe, for example, in the last 20 years or so.
Yes, so that also shows how it's important for younger people to get involved in governance. Mr. President appointed me without seeing me physically. And from what we've done, the records are there to show that we've brought in a lot of energy. a lot of passion, a lot of commitment, and a lot of drive into the business of diplomacy. If you get to Burundi today, like I mentioned earlier, we've won a lot of awards. The country has recognized us in some of the things that we've done. In about a year and 7 months in Burundi, we've held the Binational Joint Commission. We have had a lot of visitors coming from Nigeria to Burundi. We've sat down with the country and we've said to them, listen, remove Nigeria from the list of people that we need to look for visa before they come to Burundi. Let us deal with visa on arrival. We've signed a lot of bilateral agreements. We've signed one on education cooperation. We are looking at the protocol for implementation at this point in time. We've signed another one on political consultation. We are looking at that of technical manpower, or what they call the TAC agreements. We are looking at BASA. We are looking at economic and trade. We are looking at agriculture. We're also looking at legal as well. So there are lots of things that we've done. Nigeria, in the last 3 months, we've also held what we call the maiden edition of the Nigeria-Burundi Business Summits, basically bringing in private sectors from Nigeria to Burundi to come and sit down together. An offshoot of that was to have the Nigeria-Burundi Business Council, which the president of Burundi inaugurated. So what we are showing is that the objective for me personally is to show that young people are ready to get involved in the business of governance. It's also to show that whatever you think that the older people can do, there are lots of young people that are knocking on the door and saying, hey, we are good to go. You know, so we carry the weight of a lot of young people that are yearning to be involved in the position of leadership in the country. So we've done it. We've done a lot of work, and I know that even the minister that I report to gets report on on a constant basis as to the progresses that have been made. Because my greatest achievement will be that looking back, Nigeria will say, oh, okay, younger people can actually be ambassadors, and we will expose them to those positions so that we can get involved. Because what we've done is basically to add energy. And because I also have finance background, I also focused a lot on economic diplomacy. In diplomacy, you can either take business from that country to your country, or you also take business from your country to that country as well. You know, it goes both ways. Because we are also within the continent, Africa is one. We usually see ourselves as big brothers to the small African countries. So it's really not a problem. For whatever issues or interests that Nigeria have, I'm sure we've also established that very good relationship with the country that I'm serving at the moment. So it's I hear you loud and clear. It's a position that sometimes older people do because you require experience in doing certain things. But clearly what we've come to show is that when you also put in younger people, certain things are done faster. Certain things are, we are in a haste to achieve. We are always in a hurry to show that we also can do that. So for us, we are on the right path, and I believe that government is seeing. And I also believe that with time, the rest of the younger people, because what we are doing is basically we are like pace setters. Just go ahead and show the good way. Because if we disappoint, obviously what you find is that incoming government or subsequent won't think that there's any need to engage young people in the position. And it's not just here in ambassadorial position. If you also look at other sectors, there are places where we have very young people that are also doing well and representing the country very well, and even within the system as well.
Yeah. All right. Now, you recently talked about some of these countries having respect for Nigeria.
Yes.
I want you to tell us about how these countries, or some of these countries, actually see Nigeria politically, what our image is like, because there's no denying the fact that our political governance is still largely, driven by ethno-religious sentiments in Nigeria. Is this situation helpful to articulate and protect our interests as a country?
Okay, first of all, let me say that part of the things we do in foreign policy is not to interfere with the running of any country. As much as Nigeria is there, trying to look out for its interests, we do not get involved in whatever that is happening in that country. So we also expect, in diplomacy, it is reciprocity. We also do not expect other countries to also get involved in what is going on in Nigeria. But however, it's not about how they see us. When you move from one country to the others, to the other, what you find is that every country have their peculiar challenges. We can't begin to want our democracy to look like that of America that have stayed over 200 years. We don't want to, every country will clearly sit down and figure out what works for them. In China, for example, their system of governance is pretty much different. What I have seen that happens is that, the West wants to foist its model of democracy to us. And we are not at that point yet, because I'm asking myself, 4 years elections, yes, that's what they say, in Africa, where people are hungry, are the majority really right? If someone can't find, 3 square meals to eat, are the majority really right? We are still struggling with even managing political differences as a people. And we can't begin to compare ourselves or want to look like the developed democracies. Because in America, for example, a husband and wife can go out and one person votes blue, another person votes red, and they're happy, they go home peacefully. In Nigeria, it's a problem. Even when some of us in the Southeast say we are supporting APC, for example, they begin to look at us to, demonize us to say, how can you be, they even call a particular tribe and say that you are supporting a party of this kind of tribe. But these are internal issues that we have to deal with. Because really, in America, they have also evolved what they call the electoral college system. That means that you may have the majority of the votes, but you still not end up becoming the president of America. Under Trump, he didn't have the majority vote, but he won the electoral college. So we will understand the need to sit back and figure out what brand of democracy that works for us. And I think that a lot of African countries need to sit down and evolve to the kind of democracy that works for them. So the truth of the matter, whether we like it or not, is that Nigeria looms large within the continent. Yes, we have issues relating to all kinds of, if you move around the West African corridor, you see a lot of people migrating. A lot of Nigerians are imprisoned in most of these countries. Yes, these are the clear issues we have. But you also find out that what is driving that is because people are looking for better opportunity. People are looking for how to make, how to make a living or how to eke out a living. But even the ones that have traveled, they've been to Libya, all of these countries, traveling by water to all kinds of countries, they will also tell you that something we have that goes for us in this country is the family system, which they don't have abroad. Yeah. The family system is such that, your brother can come to your house without knocking, without notice. You just wake up in the morning, even though you have phone, he won't call you, he'll just knock and say he just came from the village. And you won't throw the person away, you open the door and the person will come in. Nobody does that. You can't even visit your child, or your parents can't come to your house abroad without giving you notice. So we have this family system that sort of accommodates one another. So these are the things that are working for us. Yes, the challenges will always be there, but I'm thinking that the right approach for a lot of developing countries in Africa is to sit down and figure out what works. I give you an example. In my village, for example, I can't take anybody to the police in my immediate kindred without bringing the matter for the kindred people to settle. It's outlawed for you to take your brother to the police with that, no matter how difficult the matter is. You must present it before your kindred and look at these issues. Yes.
Now, let's quickly talk about the point you raised about maybe Southeast and the 2023 presidency and how it's polarizing and all that. Like, what do you think it is for the Southeast? Recently there are a lot of back and forth regarding, especially with the comments by the governor of Anambra and all that. And a lot of people see that maybe the East is putting all its eggs in one basket. Is it something that is really wise?
Well, thank you very much. It's a very important question that you've asked me, and I will tell you this. The Southeast of Nigeria are one of the largest beneficiaries of Project Nigeria. And why do I say so? We are more nomadic than any tribe in the country, because there is hardly a town or a city you will go to Nigeria to today in Nigeria.
A village, actually.
And you won't find the Igbo people that are doing business. And when we travel with everything we have. We travel with our mind, we travel with our pocket, we travel with our money, you see them building houses, buying land, doing business, and developing their immediate community. We've, the people of the South are people that are very smart with commerce. You find out that we are doing very well in the area of commerce in Nigeria. But the issue of politics is such that I know that there is always this long agitation that it is the time for the Southeast, or the Southeast hasn't produced presidency in Nigeria. Yes, that's actually the reason why you see all of these issues going back and forth. Yes, there's no gainsaying the fact that we should. But in politics, the best way to deal with politics is to engage. It's not to blackmail. In politics, nothing is, you can feel entitled to something, but you have to also work for it. And that's the reason why some of us are bold enough to work with parties that are not popular in the Southeast. I wouldn't have become an ambassador today if I wasn't a member of the APC. So sometimes when you also take that risk and you're bold enough, you can also get the reward at the end of the day. So for us in the Southeast, yes, I understand the agitation. It's rightfully so. People can always feel that this is what has happened. But the issue is that agitation has to happen through the proper channel. There are political parties in Nigeria. People of the Southeast need to do their negotiation and their lobbying within the political setting and within the laws of the country that we have. I'll give you an example. When we had the primaries for the APC, there were people that came from the Southeast to run, the likes of the former Minister of Science and Technology, former Minister of Education. But in my honest assessment, I don't even think that they engaged very well, because I participated in the primaries and I never actually saw quite a lot of them engaging. Even the people of the Southeast to say that, can we form a common force? Take Ebonyi State, for example. The governor of Ebonyi State was on the ballot. The Minister of Science and Technology was on the ballot. And both of them are from the same state. So why can't both of them sit down and say, okay, let's even bring one person? So a state in the Southeast, 1 out of the 5, have 2 candidates that are running for the same position. Does that show that we have done our work very well? Absolutely no. So I agree to the fact that Soludo have raised this issue. Obi is on the ticket. He's our brother, for example, for crying out loud. He's not even the ABGA candidate, former Chief Judge of Anambra State. He's also our brother. But at the end of the day, you have to sit down and ask yourself, beyond the emotions, beyond the need for justice or whatever we are clamoring for, beyond the cry against marginalization, what are the chances of, you must, the way Nigeria is structured is such that you cannot become president of Nigeria without the support of other tribes. You must earn their trust, you must earn their respect for them to be able to vote for you. So you can't, if every Hausa person votes for an Hausa man, Igbo man votes for an Igbo man, we can't produce a president of Nigeria.
Well, sadly, time is not on our side. Thank you so much, His Excellency, for joining us on Daybreak this morning to discuss the issues bordering on, Nigerian foreign policy. Thank you.